The economy. We got some figures out this morning. They weren't really very good. You'd believe, listening to some media, this was all the fault of the UK government. And much as I'm often their fiercest critic, this is happening right across the Western world. And joining me, Andy Mayer, Chief Operating Officer of the Institute of Economic Affairs, a friend of this programme. Andy, the figures. Are we now in recession?
Nigel, we're not in recession, and the figures, as you correctly highlighted, are not that different to what's going on in the rest of the Western world. If we look at the figures the UK government put out, they're monthly GDP figures, and these shouldn't be taken too seriously anyway. These things go up and down all the time. They're not great, but to be in recession, to be clear, you have to have 2 quarters consecutive of negative growth, and we've not got that. We've got 1 month, and one before, and
the previous one was pretty flat too.
But we're not yet in recession territory, and it's not the time to be pronouncing the death of the UK economy.
So how do we compare to our neighbours?
OK, so last year we were at the front of the pack of the G7. We did really quite well in what wasn't a particularly good situation then either. At the moment, the OECD forecast for 2022, and the OECD, to be clear, is the main forecasting body for the developed nations, we're ahead of the pack. What people are focused on, those people who want to talk Britain down all the time, is that next year the OECD is forecasting we'll be at the bottom of the pack along with Russia. But we shouldn't take these things just in isolation. So it matters over the course of history how we're doing on GDP on a year-to-year basis. So these things, in the long run, the UK isn't doing brilliantly. It could do a lot better.
Yes.
If it had a pro-growth government and a pro-growth economy.
Yes, and allow people to build houses and produce their own energy and all of those things. But the CBI, our friends that run the big businesses, think they've got the solutions, don't they?
Well, OK, so the CBI, I think we need to remember that the CBI is like the National Union of Students for Grown-ups. So all those people who want to be Labour Party ministers one day, they leave the NUS at the end of their student careers and they go to the CBI to become analysts in the business economy. Now, they're rather like the Financial Times in some respects. The FT is described as a business paper that doesn't like business very much. And the CBI is a bit lukewarm on people who are actually innovative and want to change things.
We will allow the CBI right to reply, by the way, but go on.
Absolutely. So they're not wrong about everything. The CBI just occasionally comes out with something radical, like maybe cut a few taxes, maybe deregulate a bit, and both of those things are important. But what they tend to come out with, firstly, is a very negative assessment because they don't seem to think it's OK to talk up the UK government for whatever reason.
And they still hate Brexit.
And they still dislike Brexit. And they then come up with very small things that won't make a difference. So, for example, in their list of 7 things to fix, they came up with, let's improve the planning consents of wind farms. Now, that's not wrong. On the energy picture, and energy is the root of this recession, it would be a good thing to revolutionise planning across the board.
Yeah, including house building. Where I'm told a whole series of environmental regulations are holding back house building in a very, very big way. Andy, you know, the Institute of Economic Affairs, you are, I guess, a Thatcherite, free market style think tank. If I said to the IEA, you know, you've got 45 seconds to give me 3 things government could do. As I said already, I'm not blaming them for everything. There is a downturn going on across the Western world. What 3 things would the IEA do?
First of all, it's reverse the tax rises that the Chancellor brought in the spring. They need to go. Secondly,
because they slow growth.
They slow growth. I mean, we need to stimulate the economy at this point. We don't need to shut it down. We need to revolutionise planning across the board, not just for one type of energy production. And we need to deregulate. The CBI said something about maybe tinkering with the apprenticeship levy. Get rid of it. Let's have instead the ability for companies to offset training against their taxes. And that would help. But they fundamentally need to stop tinkering and take this seriously because they're just terrified of doing anything radical that would actually make a difference.
They are. Andy Mayer, thank you very much indeed. So there we are. The figures are not good. But we're not doing quite as badly as some elements of mainstream media would have you believe.